Have you ever wondered how a penniless kid with only the clothes on his back could grow up to lead an entire nation through its darkest hour? Most people believe that only those born into wealth or power can change history, but Abraham Lincoln started life with nothing more than his own determination and a hunger to learn. Picture a cold winter dawn in 1809. A single-room log cabin stands alone in the Kentucky woods. Inside, by the flickering glow of a small fire, a baby boy is born. His parents Thomas and Nancy Lincoln huddle in the chilly air, frightened and hopeful, praying this fragile life might one day escape the hardship that waits outside their humble walls. Lincoln's childhood was defined by hard labor and simple comforts. He split logs for fences, worked the fields from sunrise to sunset, and huddled by that same fireplace each night, reading borrowed books by the dim light. With no formal school for miles, he taught himself grammar, arithmetic, and the law. Every plank he sawed, every letter he studied, fueled his belief that knowledge and perseverance could lift him far beyond his log cabin's threshold. Imagine young Abe walking 3 miles to borrow a single book, his only ticket to a world he could barely imagine. He learned to read the words, but more importantly, he learned to read people and ideas. As he grew, he carried this self-made education into flatboat voyages down the Mississippi, a fledgling law practice in Illinois, and countless speeches delivered beneath the open sky. Rejection came, often failed business ventures, lost elections, but each setback only sharpened his resolve. How did this boy of humble birth become the voice of a divided nation? How did he find the courage to stand against slavery's spread, to risk everything in a 4-way presidential race, and to issue a bold proclamation that would change the course of history? In the next part, we will follow Abraham Lincoln's journey from those freezing Kentucky mornings through the trials of war and the promise of freedom he carried in his heart. When Abe was still a boy, life on the frontier meant hard work from dawn until dark. He and his father built their cabin, cleared trees, and planted crops in Kentucky's rocky soil. There was no schoolhouse nearby, so each winter he kept his mind alive by borrowing whatever books he could find: Aesop's Fables, Pilgrim's Progress, even a volume of Shakespeare. By the flicker of a homemade pine knot lamp, he memorized passages, taught himself proper speech, and dreamed of a larger world beyond the farm. At age 19, Lincoln left home for New Salem, Illinois, hoping to make his fortune. He worked in a general store, delivered mail along dusty roads, and split rail fences for neighbors. He listened to travelers' tales and practiced writing letters and petitions. One day a customer complained that the store's justice of the peace wouldn't hear his case. Young Abe drafted a polite petition, delivered it, and won the man's gratitude and his own introduction to law. Lincoln's first taste of politics came in 1832, when he ran for the Illinois legislature. He was only 23, barefoot much of the time, and lost that election by a small margin. Undeterred, he returned to frontier life, captaining a militia company in the Black Hawk War, running his general store, which later failed, and studying law books by lantern light. He walked miles to borrow law volumes, carried them home in his arms, and read every page until the words felt like old friends. By 1836, he passed the bar exam and opened a small law practice in Springfield. As a lawyer, Lincoln built his reputation on fairness and clear speech. He rode circuit, traveling on horseback to remote county seats, where farmers and merchants trusted him to solve disputes honestly. He was so tall and lean that townspeople nicknamed him Honest Abe, and his deep laugh and gentle manners put clients at ease. In courtrooms without records, his gift for storytelling became his greatest asset. He could paint a vivid picture of events, ask precise questions, and guide juries to just verdicts. Meanwhile, the nation was wrestling with a growing crisis, the expansion of slavery into new territories. Lincoln watched fellow legislators debate these issues with fierce passion. Though he believed slavery was wrong, he also understood the fear and prejudice on both sides. In speeches on the prairie, he argued not for immediate abolition, but for stopping slavery's growth, an idea that won him both admiration and fierce criticism. By 1858, Lincoln was challenging Senator Stephen Douglas in a series of debates that drew crowds from across Illinois. Standing beneath open skies, Lincoln spoke softly, but with unwavering conviction. He warned that a house divided against itself could not stand. His words, simple yet profound, echoed through the fields. Though he narrowly lost the Senate race, his reputation soared beyond Illinois. Newspapers published his speeches nationwide, and people began to see that this self-educated prairie lawyer might one day shape America's destiny. Through sweat, setbacks, and countless miles in worn boots, Abraham Lincoln transformed himself from a log cabin farmer's son into a respected lawyer and persuasive speaker. He had learned that every rail he split, every book he read, and every speech he gave built a foundation stronger than any plantation wall. Next, we will see how Lincoln's unlikely nomination and election in 1860 thrust him into the presidency and into the heartbreak of civil war. In November 1860, nobody expected the tall, lean lawyer from Illinois to win the presidency, least of all Lincoln himself. The nation was bitterly divided into four main camps, and Lincoln's name barely appeared in ballots below the Mason-Dixon line. Yet, when the votes were counted, he emerged victorious, capturing a clear majority of the northern states. His election sparked rage in the South. One by one, 7 states seceded even before he took office, forming the Confederate States of America. On March 4, 1861, Lincoln stood on the steps of the U.S. Capitol and delivered his inaugural address, pleading for unity. "We are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection." His calm words belied the storm looming ahead. Just 6 weeks later, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Under that thunderous cannonade, the Civil War began, and the young president found himself at the helm of a shattered nation. Lincoln spent the next 4 years under the weight of unimaginable choices. He balanced military strategy with political pressures, working with generals while striving to keep the border states loyal. At times, he faced criticism from all sides, some demanding immediate abolition, others insisting on preserving slavery to keep the peace. Every telegram brought news of lost lives. Every battlefield report tested his resolve. Yet through it all, his conviction never wavered. On January 1, 1863, in a simple proclamation that changed everything, Lincoln declared, "All persons held as slaves are, and henceforward shall be free." It was a bold gamble. He risked losing support in the delicate border states and facing fierce backlash in the North. But he understood that the nation's moral compass had to point toward liberty. The Emancipation Proclamation transformed the war's purpose, no longer being just a fight to preserve the Union, but a struggle for human freedom. Enslaved men and women escaped to Union lines, swelling the Northern armies and striking a blow against the Confederacy's labor force. By mid-1863, Lincoln faced another test at Gettysburg. After 3 days of brutal fighting, he journeyed to the battlefield months later to dedicate a cemetery. Standing before a crowd of thousands, he spoke just 272 words, but those few sentences reshaped America's identity. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Gettysburg Address was more than a eulogy. It was a promise that the Union would not only endure, but would emerge stronger and more just. Through victories at Vicksburg and Chattanooga, and setbacks like the bloodletting at Cold Harbor, Lincoln guided the war's course. He appointed Ulysses S. Grant as General-in-Chief, trusting him to press the Confederates with relentless force. As 1864 turned to 1865, Union armies closed in on Richmond. On April 9th, General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. 4 years of fratricidal conflict were drawing to a close. Lincoln's leadership through these crucibles defined his legacy. He had started as an unlikely candidate, yet he became the steady hand that preserved a divided nation and moved it toward freedom. His courage under fire and the moral clarity of his actions stands as the pinnacle of his life's work. Abraham Lincoln's life shows us that true leadership is born from resilience, humility, and an unwavering belief in justice. From the log cabin in Kentucky where he chopped rails and read borrowed books by Pine Knot Lamp to the highest office in the land, he carried one guiding principle: that all men are created equal. He taught himself law on a frontier full of hardship, built trust through honest words and deeds, and used the power of speech to unite a fractured nation. When he stood in Washington during the Civil War, Lincoln faced choices no one else could make, balancing military strategy with the moral imperative to end slavery, weighing the safety of the Union against the promise of freedom for millions. His Emancipation Proclamation turned a war to save the nation into a war to redefine it. At Gettysburg, he transformed grief into resolve with just 272 words, reminding Americans that government of, by, and for the people must endure. Yet Lincoln's greatest legacy lies in what he gave the future: the idea that leadership means serving others, even when the cost is your own life. He walked to Ford's Theatre on April 14, 1865, believing in reconciliation and healing, only to be struck down by an assassin's bullet. His death plunged the nation into mourning, but his vision lived on in the amendments that followed, abolishing slavery, guaranteeing equal protection, and expanding democracy. Today, Lincoln's story resonates because he faced failure, lost elections, personal tragedy, national crisis, and refused to yield. He showed us that setbacks can strengthen resolve, that words can reshape history, and that quiet conviction can move millions. His journey reminds each of us that no matter our origins, with determination, humility, and courage, we can stand up to division, champion justice, and write our own chapter in the story of progress. I have 3 special questions for you. 1. Which moment in Lincoln's life, from teaching himself by firelight to delivering the Gettysburg Address, inspires you the most, and why? 2. Do you believe a single speech act can transform a society? Can you think of one in your own community? 3. What cause would you be willing to defend, even when faced with overwhelming opposition?
If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me make more stories for you.